Patch 11.13 is bringing a bunch of balance changes in addition to bringing a new game mode. In this video, I will be going over the patch and then predict how this will change the meta, as well as giving a tier list on what the next patch will look like. First up we have traits. Academy is getting nerfed across the board, a tiny nerf at 2 and a small nerf at 4, so the lower parts of the trait should still be worth running. 6 and 8 are getting large nerfs, so those are probably not going to be worth running unless you have a good number of spatulas or augments for the comp. Bodyguard is getting a buff at all levels. They now get a shield which makes them better overall against all sorts of damage. Colossus is getting a buff. This will make both Socialite Scion and Mutants stronger. Most of the time when you are running a Galio though, you don't run Cho'Gath or Scion unless you are playing those two comps mentioned earlier. So the Colossus buff probably won't affect anybody besides those two comps. Enforcer is getting a buff and a nerf. Now you can't CC units that have QSS or are Colossuses anymore. But you can't CC Sephard units anymore, so it's a nice quality of life change that makes a lot of sense, but it's a nerf at the end of the day. Imperial 5 is getting a buff. This trait is almost never played. You only see 3 Imperial Samira or Scion, so it's a welcome change for me. Innovators is getting nerfed at all levels. There is a lot of text, but the TLDR is that it's even weaker now when you only have 1 stars, and when you only have 2 stars it's a little weaker, but if you have some 3 stars it's about the same level. The dragon from Innovator 7 is getting reworked, so it's a bit hard to tell if it'll be stronger or weaker, but from what it looks like, it will be more useful as a tank and utility unit. Snipers are getting buffed and nerfed. While the sniper trait is not active, they lose 1 attack range, but when it is active, it is the same. But now the sniper emblem gives +1 attack range, which is great to see as now it will be more useful on the other units you turn into snipers. Mercenary is getting nerfed at all levels, so the TLDR is that it gives you generally less gold at all levels and less Nikos helps at all levels. And now you can't get items when win streaking with 5 mercenaries anymore. This should still be a fantastic trait if you get it early, but it shouldn't be something you chase after anymore. Bruiser is getting a small nerf at 4 and 6. This is a nerf to Chemtech and reroll Trundle. Chemtech definitely needed it, but Trundle wasn't that great as a comp. Clockwork 4 and 6 are getting buffed. Now it might be worth going for 4 Clockwork late game with the Jin comp, but most likely you won't do this without a +1 to augment or emblem. Mutant is getting buffed and nerfed depending on the version. Cybernetic is getting buffed, which is nice. This one felt underwhelming. And the Darkstar and Elderwood versions are getting nerfed, and those were OP as hell, so they might need to see even further nerfs in my opinion. Scrap is getting a pretty big buff. The TLDR is now units like Blitzcrank will never get Deathblade or Hurricane anymore, and he will only get items that are useful on him. It depends a little on how the developers have defined which items are useful on which champions, but most likely they've only removed the obvious ones that don't work. Moving on to champions and 1 costs. Ezreal is getting a nerf at 1 star and 2 star, and buffed at 3 star. This is fine, and the Innovator opener should still be strong considering it was OP before the nerf. He should still be a premier AD item carrier. Garen is getting a small nerf, which will make him a little weaker early game, and also hits the Garen reroll comp as well. Singed is getting a tiny buff at 3 star. This could potentially make a reroll Innovator comp viable. Twisted Fate is getting a starting mana nerf. This won't have that big of an impact. Now Morello will be a bit worse on him as it takes longer before it starts burning people. Siggs is getting a tiny buff. This won't change anything, but now he will always be able to win stage 1-2. Apparently he could lose before, which was pretty funny. Katarina is getting buffed, but since Academy got nerfed, this should be about power neutral. This does however make her better in reroll Shaco comps. Kog'Maw is getting a buff, which is nice. He did feel a bit weak without Mutant, so sniper openers should be better now. Swain is getting nerfed at 2 and 3 star. This is fine as he could heal to full in a lot of cases, but it does nerf the Swain Drain comp quite a bit. Trundle is getting a small nerf. Now he won't deal as much damage, but he will still steal the same amount of AD. This makes his scaling into the fight a little worse, but he's still a great unit in the early and mid game. Gangplank is getting a big nerf. He will be less tanky and also deal less damage. He should still work as a carry, but he will need items if he's going to farm gold. Misfortune is getting nerfed at all levels. Much deserved nerf if you ask me. She feels really strong with AP items, and now it will be a little weaker. Samira is getting a decent nerf. Her 3-star version is incredibly strong, and now it will hopefully not run through teams as efficiently anymore. They also reduced her spellcast time, so she's getting a buff alongside of these nerfs. Shaco is getting a small buff. This will really help you get to the Syndicate Akali comp with more HP, and also if you're rerolling Shaco 3-star. Cho'Gath is getting a tiny buff. This will make it a little easier to get stacks on him, but this buff is so minuscule you would have never noticed unless I told you about it. Dr. Mundo is getting a small nerf. He will be about as tanky, but will deal less damage, which is fine. His healing will come more over time now instead of being instant. Fiora gets a really good buff. Now her cast time is quicker, so she won't get bursted down as easily anymore. We might even start putting items on Fiora now over Yone because of this. Urgot is getting a small AD nerf as well as a small nerf to his spell. This will make him a little weaker, but not anything too crazy. Yone is getting a small nerf. This will make him more reliant on challengers and Rageblade to get attack speed. Galio is getting a small buff at 1-star. Now he will cast a bit quicker and deal a tiny bit more damage. Jace in melee form is getting a nerf. Now he gains 10 less armor and MR. He should still be a great tank, and he should still be able to carry in melee form with the right items. Jinx is getting a small nerf. I personally don't like this, as I think she is one of the most inconsistent 5-costs in the game, so I will definitely not be playing too much Jinx carry next patch because of this. Tahm Kench gets the nerf. This only reduces his damage, which doesn't matter too much. The main thing that makes him great is the CC he provides when eating units. Yuumi gets a tiny nerf. This is deserved as she was probably the best 5-cost last patch. This will still make her fantastic, but a bit more easy to burst down while she's ulting. Now moving on to augments. We're getting more different augments routes, so it's going to be harder to predict which augment quality your next one is going to be. This shouldn't change how you play, but it's still nice to know for those who are interested. They're buffing a couple of Ornn items. This should make the Ornn augment a little more interesting, but it still has the issue of only giving you 3 options, but now the weaker ones won't be as bad. I am a bit scared of the Monazane item. This means that Orianna and Janna will cast every 4 seconds with this, and that is a lot of CC. Ardent Sensor is getting buffed by becoming a tier 1 augment. This one should be considered more often now, as I've never taken this when it was offered before. All for One is getting nerfed. Now the health percentage granted goes from 40% to 33%. Now the last Imperial Alive won't be as much of a giant as they were last patch. Lifelong Learning is being moved to tier 1. This augment is already great, but now you should have it offered on 1-4 more often, and it should be easier to commit to Heimer or Lissandra carry. Runic Shield is getting a nerf and a buff. It lasts as long as Exiles now with an 8-second duration. In return, it gets some increased stats. Phony Frontline is getting nerfed. Now the training dummies will have 100 less HP. This also scales into every stage. The augment was pretty good and probably still will be, as it gives you a ton of frontline in the early game. Share the Spotlight is getting buffed. Now every unit adjacent to the Hex will get the full effect. This sounds really strong, but only carries really benefit from this augment, and it will also make your team pretty weak to AoE damage from units like Lux. Titanic Force is getting a nerf. This augment was insane with a bunch of bruisers, and now it should still be good, just not OP like it was before. Woodland Charm is being moved to tier 3 and gets a buff. There weren't many situations where I would take this, and it will remain the same at tier 3. Underdogs is getting buffed and nerfed. Now it has a cap, so it won't heal Cho'Gaths for insane amounts anymore. And it will be overall more useful though, so this is a nice change. Built Different is getting nerfed at tier 2 and 3, but buffed overall. In addition, now you won't get offered any more trait augments once you take it, which is nice to see. This augment opens up a ton of different playstyles, so it's nice to see that if you take this, it's even easier to build a traitless comp. Binary Airdrop gets the same buff that Scrap got, which is nice to see. In return, it gets moved to tier 2. With the change to Scrap and this augment, a Scrap comp might become meta. Calculated Loss, Dominance, Junkyard, and Built Different can't be offered on stage 4-6 anymore, which is nice to see as they were useless at that point. Sharpshooter gets a nerf. This was a fantastic augment, but now it should just be a good augment. Windfall gets a nerf, which is nice as this augment is insanely OP in the early game. There is only one item change, and that is Ionic Spark, which is getting nerfed. This item was a little OP in the early game, so it is nice to see this change. It should still be good on tanks and AP comps to shred MR. There are also some bug fixes, so you can pause the video if you want to read through those. The biggest one is that the mercenary orbs will no longer be hidden behind the Hextech core on your map. I have missed a ton of orbs because they were hiding, so this is a nice change to see. Now in order to predict what the meta will be, we'll have to look at what the meta was on the previous patch. And the meta did change quite a bit. comps such as Yone and Protectors started off dominating, but then fell off towards the end. If we look at the data, we can see that Chemtech Urgot ended up dominating, and if you were uncontested, this was a guaranteed top 4. Samira reroll as well was insanely hard to beat if she got to 3-star. We also see that Mutants, Lux, and Yone have been very popular as well. This meta was also heavily impacted by mercenaries. Since you ran Bruisers and Twin Shots with Alawi and GP, a very natural transition would be Chemtech Urgot from there, as they share the same synergies. This led to a large amount of people rolling aggressively at level 7 to cash out. Other Urgot players rolled to 7 there as well, to hit Urgots before anybody else did. Mutants did great in this meta since their primary carries were either Kog'Maw or Malzahar, and it's easy to find both of those 2-starred at level 7. What we will probably see is the meta will slow down a little. People will most likely fast date a little bit more, since comps such as Jhin and Fiora Yone didn't get nerfed that hard if they got hit at all. This will give comps like Shaco, Mutants, and Yordles more time to hit their 3-stars as well, and if those comps become meta, we will end up seeing an even slower paced and econ heavy meta that is dominated by 3-star 3 costs and 2-star 4 costs with legendaries. Let's take a look at my prediction tier list so that you know what to play when the patch goes live on Wednesday. I think that Jhin and Lux will be the best comps. These did not get nerfed at all, and they enjoy a slower paced meta. Shaco and Assassins have been decent, and they have a really high potential cap with Akali in the late game. Fiora got buffed while Academy got nerfed, so the comps should be about neutral, but with a Fiora change we might itemize her now instead of Yone. Mutants should still be really good for top 4, and they will be powerful in a slower meta when they have more time to hit their 3-stars. Urgot got hit pretty hard, but he might be really good if uncontested. I think Yordles were good last patch if you had a good opener and a good augment for them, and if the meta slows down, that would be a big indirect buff to Yordles. It is a bit hard to tell where to put Samira. She did get a nerf, but also got a buff that decreases her cast time, and that will definitely increase her DPS. Garen reroll was good last patch, but with some small Academy nerfs and mana nerfs, it will just fall down to B tier in my opinion. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what video you want me to make next, and if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got over 4,000 other players there who are hungry to climb. And if you want to get coached by me, the information is over on the Discord server as well. So take care and see you in the next video.